Hey, Kirk Williamson with KPN Photo Tours. We got a great video for you this week. We're going to be talking about the 50mm f1.0 from Fuji. I'd like to thank the people out at the Pixel Connection and Fuji USA for getting me this lens to review for the week. It's been great. We've got some great images for you, and there's a lot of discussion about everything that goes on with this, the focusing, the weight, the ergonomics of it, everything. So stay tuned. So let's look at the size of this lens compared to the Fuji 90mm f2. They're both the same height, but as you can see, one's a little bit bigger. The 90 is a 62mm front thread, and this is a 77mm front thread. And weight-wise, the 50 is a little bit heavier. This is a pretty nice lens, pretty light. But boy, look at that. They're almost exactly the same height. It's a pretty interesting comparison. The bokeh out of this is pretty nice. So is this too. Okay, so here's this lens, the 50mm f1.0 with the XH1 and the battery grip. You can see that it's a pretty big rig, but you know what? If you look at it, it fits in the palm of your hand really well and balances excellent. Now, if we take the grip off, you can see the form factor is a lot smaller. And, you know, because this XH1's got the grip on it here, right here anyway, boy, you know, it fits in the palm of your hand. It's very nice, very easy to use. And, you know, for people that shoot without the grip, it's very comfortable. I think you'll see that the XT3 is pretty close to this as well. Okay, here we are with the XT3. This is a smaller camera, and I'm telling you, this whole rig fits very nicely in your hand. It's easy to hold. It's much lighter than all the other camera manufacturers. And believe me, look at the small form factor this has. Yes, this is a little bit heavier than other Fuji lenses, but for primes, you know, 56 is a lot smaller. It's about that much. Somewhere in that range, it's pretty much smaller. But this is a beautiful setup right here. And let me show you what it's like without the battery grip. It's still pretty amazing. Look at that. That's the form factor without the grip. And, you know, it still fits in the palm of your hand, but for me, it's much more comfortable with the battery grip. It seems to work a lot better that way. That's for me. It could be different for other people. See? Well, now here it is with the baby camera, the XT30. You can see it overpowers this camera by quite a bit. But you know what? It's still not bad. It's still, I mean, you got your hand underneath it like this. Oh, by the way, never shoot like this. You can't balance the lens. Anyway, it's still comfortable. It's not bad at all. I could easily shoot with this lens and not have a problem with it at all. Of course, I have a battery grip on, a regular grip on this XT30, which makes it easier to hand hold. Without this grip, it would be a lot more difficult to hold on to this lens. So, that's how these lenses look on the three cameras here, the XH1 and the XT3 and the XT30. So I was really curious as to what it was going to look like at f1, so I headed to the local coffee shop and shot this photograph here. I really love the background of this image here, and I just wanted to see what it was going to look like, and it's a very pleasing background. Then I convinced the owner to pose for a portrait. Really love the way this image looks at f1, and it's sharp as a tack. Right on his eyes. As you can see in this little bit closer portrait here, his eyes are just sharp as a tack. Beautiful, beautiful rendering of the background as well. Love the bokeh. Then I headed down to the waterfront to visit with my friend Bill, who is a fisherman, and these portraits really came out beautiful. I love this portrait. Look how gorgeous the background is. Beautifully knocked out. Look how sharp his eyes are. A wonderful portrait. Really like the way this lens performed shooting environmental portraits like this. Great background, as you can see. This next shot coming up is a little bit tighter. As you can see, it's a tight headshot. And of course, his nose is out of focus, as well as being bent. But look how sharp his eyes are. Holy mackerel. And the background is completely out. Disappears just past his eyes, which is amazing to me. I love this shot of him in the doorway of his wheelhouse. Really, really captures Bill at his best.
As you can see, the background is out. His eyes are tack sharp. Next, I took him outside to shoot against the light and see what the bokeh was going to be like with the highlights in the water behind him. And as you can see, we see some cat's eye or some football effect going on. I also wanted to see if there was any problem with the chromatic aberration in the highlights in the background. And I turned the Lightroom tool on and off, and I didn't see any at all. I know Omar Gonzalez saw some chromatic aberration in the highlights, but I didn't see any. It was amazing.
Here we are down in the center of Rockport, T Wharf, and I'm going to shoot some shots with the 50 f1.0 by Fuji. And I'm going to try and shoot a bunch of different f-stops. Problem is I can't show any bokeh because I don't have any bright highlights to really highlight it. So here we go.
Now all of these shots were made with a neutral density filter on the front to knock down the shutter speed a bit to 4000, and all shot at f1. I really love the way the background looks. Boy, it's incredible. Look at the motif is really out, but the dinghies in front aren't so bad. I love this shot. Look at the way it's just focused on the very part of the foreground. Background's completely out. Just very, very different. I also love this black and white version that I did here. And I love the way the background looks. It's just very, very interesting. You can get something very similar at 1.4 as well. Now this next series of shots was meant to show the vignetting at f1. You can see just very little bit in the bottom of this frame, not at the top. Very interesting. And it starts to go away around f2. You can see it doesn't look as prominent here. And then as we get up to 2.8 and 4, you don't see it at all. So very interesting. I actually don't mind the vignetting that much. You can really see it's pronounced in this next set of shots. Right here at f1 in the bottom left and right hand corner. Not at the top as much. But you got here at 1.4, it's still visible. You can still see it. Not at the top, like I said. Here we go at f2. You can start to see it's starting to disappear. When we get to f8, 2.8, it's almost totally gone. And then when we get to f4, it's totally gone. So very, very interesting.
Now the focusing on this XH1 here is a little bit slower than you would think, and you know, I'm gonna give you and it makes some noise. Here, I'm gonna try and see if I can. Can you hear that? It's making some noise. So for video, I don't know, maybe we'll see. But on the XH1, the focusing is a little bit slower. It doesn't focus as nicely as it should. On the XT3, however, it focuses wonderfully. It does a magnificent job. So that's it for the focusing issues. And I've got some images coming up here. Continuous. It actually locked on pretty good in continuous. I was surprised. Even at f1, I shot some cars coming right at me, and it worked actually pretty well. Here are the images.
In this next set of images, I wanted to see how the continuous autofocus was going to work. And it actually locked on at f1 and worked very, very well with the XT3 with the battery grip on it in boost. So it kept up really well. I was surprised.
Well, that was interesting. I wanted to shoot some continuous and see how the lens held up focusing wise. And I shot cars coming down. Nobody riding by on a bike, so what are you going to do, you know? And I shot a bunch of different apertures of different scenes. So we'll see what happens. You know, it looked to me in the viewfinder after I was checking them, they looked fine to me. Maybe a little bit of back focus, but we'll see. Well, I guess the question of the week is this lens for you? The 50 f1. It's a beautiful lens. But let me know in the comments below whether or not you would purchase this lens. So that's it for this week's video. The 51.4. Thanks to the people out at the Pixel Connection in Avon, Ohio. This has been great. Got some great shots with this lens. Mostly the portraits. Now, you have to understand that this lens is really a professional's lens. It's something that people that do weddings and portraits for a living are really going to like this lens. For me, not so much. I do mostly landscapes now. I do some news assignments, and I'm not really going to carry this around with me. I'm going to carry around something a little bit lighter. So, anyway, if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, give me a notification, hit the notification bell, and give me a comment. That would be great. You know, the question of the week. And maybe a thumbs up too. That would be awesome. So that's it for this week, the 50 f1.0, and we'll catch you next time.